The agenda, it's a little different today than what we normally have in our meetings. This is our one and only meeting scheduled for the month of August of this year, and that's because usually it's hard to get folks to come to the meetings because of other commitments. And you'll notice there's 2 of us here. We're expecting 3 total, but what that means is we don't have a quorum, so therefore we aren't able to take action on any business items today, make any business decisions. So this will just now be a briefing meeting for the TriMet Board of Directors.
Point of order.
Excuse me, Lane, sit down, please.
Point of order. Under Robert's Rules of Order, due to a quorum not being present, that the board must either reschedule, adjourn, or recess the original meeting that was scheduled for August 14th. Due to Oregon Revised Statute 267.125, the district board shall hold regular monthly meetings at a time and place fixed by the rules of the board. Kelly Runyon sent me an email yesterday saying that this is not a meeting defined under Oregon law. Therefore, this is not an official meeting under Oregon law. Therefore, I hereby call for a reschedule of the TriMet Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, August 21st, 2013, or Wednesday, August 28th, 2013, to comply with Oregon law.
Lane, thank you. I'm going to have to direct you to stop if you're done now. If you're not stopped, I'm going to ask you to leave the premises right now.
Are you going to reschedule the board meeting?
No, we have a board meeting scheduled. Our next regular scheduled board meeting is in September.
Do you have one for August?
Lane,
no. President Warner, I place you under arrest, under citizen's arrest, for violating Oregon Revised Statute 267.125.
If you don't leave, you're going to be considered trespassing and you will be subject to arrest. So are you done now? Please sit down.
You are not following the rules yourself.
Thank you, Lane, for your legal interpretation. Please sit down. Thank you. All right. Since we do not have a quorum today, we will not have a meeting, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is on September 11th. September 11th. So that's our briefing meeting, and September 25th is our normal next business meeting. So thank you. We now have that on the record. So therefore, we're going to continue with the briefing that we have planned for today. All the business items that were to be considered today will be moved to future meetings where we'll have a quorum and not have a public forum today, as I'd like the board members to have an opportunity to hear all the testimony. So if any of you have come today to testify under the public forum, I'm going to apologize right now for the lack of a quorum. The 3 of us, I believe, will be around after the meeting briefing is done if you want to talk with us now. But what I would encourage you to do is come back to our regular business meeting on the 25th of September, provide your input in a formal way. On one other housekeeping issue, I wanted to advise any of you that hadn't read the press lately. We were contacted by the governor's office in regard to a clerical error made when board member Joe Esmond was appointed to the TriMet Board of Directors in June of this year. Board member Esmond, who lives in District 2, was supposed to have been appointed to replace board member Schweitzer, whose term ended July 1st. But the clerical error incorrectly appointed him to District 3 as a replacement for our previous director, Steve Clark, in that area. The governor's office has consulted with the Secretary of State's and the Secretary of the Senate and the Rules Committee staff and confirmed that the appointment that was made does stand. This error has been corrected, and board member Esmond now officially represents District 2. However, board member Esmond's votes on items that he took while he was here previously in the wrong district have been invalidated, but do not affect the actions since those board action items had more than sufficient votes for passage. I also want to take a moment and thank board member Tiffany Schweitzer for her years of service to the agency. She's a very competent person. I learned a lot from her in just the short amount of time I've been on the board. She will be missed, and hopefully we'll have some sort of recognition and celebration of her time here with TriMet in the very near future. So that wraps up the housekeeping items, and again, I apologize for not having a quorum here today, but again, we look forward to talking with you after our briefing. So with that, unless there's something else from General Manager, I'm going to get right into the board briefing reports. Okay? So the first item we have is the public records process review, and we have a Stolburn firm here with a couple folks, Scott Shore and Josh Ross. Good morning.
Good morning.
So,
Please, go ahead.
Mr. Board President, I think just a very short introduction and a few words before I hand this over to General Counsel Jan Twan to introduce our panel. You know, there have been headlines about transparency, and frankly, what we wanted to do is really get to the bottom of this and asked for a very independent review by the gentleman and the firm represented by Stolburn. And I wanted this report to come directly to the board, which is why you're hearing this directly. And I would also note that this has been of great interest to our general counsel and her staff as well, since they generally administer the public records and discovery processes for the agency. So I'll turn it over to Jana with that.
Thank you. I just want to add that the firm that we selected, Stolburn, has significant experience with complex litigation, in particular plaintiffs' litigation, and in fact they sued TriMet in a very large commercial suit many years ago, or a few years ago. It was that background in complex litigation coupled with their knowledge of government and government records is the reason why I selected Stolburn. And so today we have Scott Shore and Josh Ross presenting.
Thank you to the TriMet board. My name is Scott Shore. I'm the managing shareholder for Stolburn. I'm joined by my colleague Josh Ross, who's also a shareholder at the firm. As Ms. Duran mentions, we're a boutique litigation firm that also does real estate and transactional matters. We've been in this community and practicing throughout the United States for the past 30 years. We have familiarity with the litigation process, particularly discovery process, which we'll talk a little bit about today, and with public records through our representation of public agencies in the state of Oregon. To give you some background, we were contacted by Jana Turan, the general counsel, on May 22nd, 2013, and our understanding of the purpose of the report and what Ms. Turan asked us to do was to provide an outside review of the public records process and TriMet's process in responding to litigation discovery requests. And though those are similar and related, they're also distinct in a way. We're probably all a little more familiar with the public records process, where a member of the public asks TriMet to produce public documents in a public records request. TriMet has an obligation under the law to be open and transparent and to provide documents in response, although there are exemptions and conditional exemptions for certain limited records under the law as well. We may not be as familiar as a group with the litigation discovery process, but in litigation, parties propound discovery requests on each other, requests for information, and requests for documents. And in that process, and in litigation, TriMet has an obligation to produce responsive documents, but again, there are some limitations. TriMet does not have to produce documents that are irrelevant to the matter, or if the requests are overly burdensome in light of the size of the litigation. I'll talk a little bit about the process in putting together the report. It's quite extensive report. It's approximately 30 pages long, and it's all laid out in the written materials. But in general, we focused on interviews of the members of the litigation team that were involved in litigation discovery, and we focused on those employees that were involved in the public records process, and we spoke with members of the information technology department, because quite a bit of this report, and as we'll discuss, is about how information is moved from hard copy documents to electronic documents, and in litigation we refer to that as electronic discovery or e-discovery. One limitation we had is that we did not look at open litigation files because those are ongoing matters and they're subject to certain privileges, but we did look at some samples of closed litigation files, and we looked at a large sample of public records requests, closed public records request files. There are quite extensive conclusions at the end of the report, but there's an executive summary at the beginning, and I'll highlight some of the findings that we made. In general, we found that TriMet has a very professional and able legal department that you should be proud of. It works hard to assist the public in responding to their public records requests. It promotes an open and transparent process, and it works to help the public in finding and responding to the information that the public requests. TriMet has done a particularly good job in the last couple of years of formalizing the public records requests and improving it, making it more open and transparent. For instance, all TriMet's public records requests are now posted online, so all members of the public can see what TriMet's been requested and the time frame and how they're responding. Despite the improvements in the process, TriMet still faces significant hurdles because of the vast amount of information in the agency and the increasing number of public records requests. In 2012, TriMet had approximately 500 requests. It looks, if TriMet's on pace this year, it should receive over 600 public records requests. Some of these may be quite simple requests, some of them may be quite extensive and require substantial research throughout the agency. In light of that, one of our recommendations is that TriMet needs to add more public records personnel, and it needs to make a large investment in the infrastructure of its documents and information systems. And by that, TriMet does not have a document map or a catalog of all the information and documents within the agency. We think TriMet should invest further in cataloging all of its documents to have a handle on the information it has. And I think Mr. Rand's going to talk about this. While we were doing this report, there was a public request for proposal to start that process. I think Mr. Rand's going to talk about that. In addition, we believe TriMet should invest further in electronic tools and electronic discovery tools to gather the electronic information that TriMet has. TriMet does not have a central way to easily search throughout the agency for all of its electronic information. It has tools that will allow it to search for its electronic information in different parts of the agency, and it can do this, but those tools seem a little outdated and they're cumbersome. And if it can improve the electronic tools to gather electronic information, that would substantially benefit the public records process and the litigation discovery process. I'm going to have some concluding remarks about the litigation discovery process. My colleague Josh Ross really led the report and the effort on the public records, and maybe he has some comments on that.
Sure. Thank you all for inviting us to speak today. I'm Josh Ross, and I did look a little bit closer at the public records request side of our project as opposed to the litigation request side of things. I'll just maybe flesh out a little bit in detail some of what Scott's already touched on. I think one of the most important things for the board to hear today is that after our investigation, and our conclusion was this agency treats public records requests very, very seriously. They do it as an important public obligation that they have and respect and want to do the best job they can to do it, and in most instances are doing that fantastic job. As Scott mentioned, most requests will come in and be sort of what I'm calling a typical request, or maybe a more straightforward request. For instance, a video from a bus, a particular employee's time records from a particular period of time, something that isn't very burdensome or cumbersome to locate and to produce. In those situations, things work pretty seamlessly and flawlessly. They timely respond. There's a statutory obligation to send an acknowledgement letter out. Those are done timely. The records are located very efficiently with the help of a records coordinator who goes to the appropriate division and asks the person with the best knowledge how to locate the records, and they're produced. Some requests are far more complicated and far larger in scope. But even in those situations, I think the thing that most impressed us was that the agency is very proactive in their handling of these things. So for example, they will often make suggestions about the language of the request when it's clear to the agency what the requester is asking for, even though it may be a little bit ambiguous in the way it was framed in the request itself. They're quick to put together cost estimates, which they're required to do under the law, and to let the requester know that there are certain costs associated with producing the records. They're good at communicating with the requesters on a regular basis when they need to keep them up to date about the process. And as Scott mentioned, one of the significant changes in the past couple of years is that they put all that data online so people can check on a daily basis what the status is. And oftentimes these requests come in and some part of the request may ask for information as opposed to asking for a record. And that can be a little challenging to handle, but the agency is very proactive in kind of slicing those up, focusing on the requests that are for records and dealing with those, and then sending out the request for information to the other appropriate department where those need to be addressed. And as Scott mentioned, there's also a process for evaluating whether or not a particular exemption may or may not apply in a particular case, and there's a process in place for those types of review by the law department when it's necessary. I think the improvements that are needed on the public record side really do focus on staffing and overburden of the folks who are handling these on a day-to-day basis. There's basically a single employee who is tasked with oversight of all of these requests. And the people on the ground who are in the divisions who are finding the records are doing that in addition to their normal job duties. And oftentimes that's a lot of work. It can take days or weeks to compile the information, figure out what the cost estimates are going to be, et cetera. So addressing the staffing needs and addressing the reality that the volume and complexity of the requests going forward, if this current trend continues going forward, that's going to be something that the agency needs to address. The data mapping component of things is also very important, making sure that the folks on the ground in the divisions, including the supervisors in those divisions, understand how things are kept, where things are located, and so that they can streamline and make more efficient the process of locating things once a more complicated request comes in.
Finally, some concluding remarks on the litigation discovery side. We found and believe that TriMet's litigation team is also a professional and capable team. Does not attempt to hide documents in the litigation discovery process. It has begun over the last few months a better process to search for, preserve, and produce documents responsive to the litigation requests, but it could improve this process a bit going forward. In particular, with respect to electronic discovery, TriMet has not been able to keep up with all the developments in electronic discovery in the case law, particularly as those impact the larger cases that impact agency-wide issues. And we recommend the litigation team stay informed of those developments as it's beginning to. We also believe that part of that is an investment issue. TriMet's litigation team would also benefit from having the electronic discovery tools that I mentioned earlier, because so much of litigation, particularly large cases, has moved towards electronic discovery. So the ability to quickly search for, retrieve, produce, and manage information, and produce it in electronic formats is key in large-scale litigation. And in the same way that the public record side might benefit from an investment in those electronic tools, the litigation team would certainly benefit from that as well. Those are all the prepared remarks, and we've got our report as well. Thank you.
Do you have some further follow-up?
I certainly can discuss what we have done in terms of addressing some of the findings that they've made and some of the recommendations. I think it's probably helpful first to put this into context. A national study showed that of all the records in an entity, that typically 60% of the records are unused and unnecessary. 1% of those records are on a legal hold, and the rest of the records are records that are used. And TriMet is no different, and one person likened it to records being a haystack and finding the records being the needle in the haystack. And I have to tell you that TriMet's haystack is big. And we have already started a process under the direction of the general manager from last year to begin going through those records and eliminating those records that are not needed so that we can focus our resources on the records that we do need and that do have a business purpose. The staffing, of course, as you know, is an issue. We do need additional staffing, but one of the things that was granted in the last budget cycle was an additional half an FTE for the records program. And as you know, we have a freeze on the number of FTEs, and when I get a half an FTE, we take a half an FTE from another part of the operation. I do believe that we do still need an additional staff person to staff the public records process and to be the point person for the legal holds and to track the legal holds and to locate the records for the litigation department. In addition to that, we had also begun a process of educating the executive directors and the directors at a meeting that we had in March, I believe it was. We discussed the importance of the public records program, and we will continue to do that annually to keep that message out there. I think that the feedback that I've received from the executive directors and the staff at TriMet is very supportive. Everybody understands what a big job this is, and we will take this on and complete this process. Also in the last budget cycle, for the first time I received some money for the records program. And so that was how we were able to issue a request for proposals. And at this time, we are locating a records expert to help us develop what he was talking about, which is the mapping. They call it a taxonomy. So basically, all of the records within TriMet, both electronic and on paper, will be cataloged, and that will make retrieval easier. But I want to assure you that TriMet has had and does have a records retention program that complies with all state recommendations. So in this case, I can assure you that there has never been a situation where records have been destroyed and have not been produced. That's what TriMet, as I just said, has the opposite problem. We seem to always have the records. But we do need the electronic research or retrieval capacity that we don't have now. So for example, we can get a request, give us all documents with the letters HOS in it, which stands for hours of service for the person who's looking for the records, but it could also have the word those in it. And we have tried to retrieve those records on our own in a cost-efficient manner, and we just do not have the capacity to do that. So what we've had to do is we've had to seek third-party assistance to come in and do those searches for us. So we will, as we move forward with the records management program, we will start with the taxonomy and the mapping, and then we will have experts help to evaluate the systems we have in place currently so that we can leverage the investments that we've already made and make the most out of those, and then we'll make some decisions about supplemental electronic discovery methods that we will add. I'm expecting this process to take about a year to get everything in place, but in the meantime, by the 1st of September, we will completely have our litigation hold process in place. Currently now, we have a process where we identify specific cases for litigation hold, but as we move forward, every incident will receive a form letter from me directing that they promptly provide all reports and if they have any records to maintain those records. We haven't done that in the past. The reason why is because TriMet receives about 2,000 incidents during the year. About 1,000 of those will become claims, and those that make it to litigation may be between 60 and 80. So you can see that as things filter down, we really haven't identified a need. But we're respectful of the law, and I think that what the report teaches us is that having a good process in place is what the court requires, and I think what the public demands, and that's what we will do. So if you have any other questions, I think of me or of our two presenters, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, General Counsel. Any comments, questions, Chair?
We have a few questions. Just so that I can understand the context of what we're dealing with here in regards to kind of the search. You know, if I were to imagine that the thousands and thousands of documents that we produce in a year of all types of information, I'm assuming, and both Scott and Josh can correct me if I'm off base, but I'm assuming that it's similar to maybe doing a Google search and getting, you know, if I were to Google search cats, I would probably get 1 million hits. And same if I were to search documents within TriMet's, I won't say database because it's not technically a database, but it's a repository of documents and information. I could potentially get thousands of hours of service documents. And are we saying that essentially currently we have to search through each of those to see if they have any relationship to whatever incident or case or records request that we're talking about?
Correct. Our ability to search is not sophisticated enough to weed out or predict which records may not be responsive. And modern software will allow that predictive coding to take place.
And I could add a little bit to that, if I may. I think that really does highlight the problem on the technology side of things, because this particular example is appropriate because, and that was one of the public records files that I reviewed in preparation for this report. You had a request that basically said all emails across the agency containing these 3 letters in a subject line. And as Ms. Turan pointed out, HOS could be found in the word those, or ghost, or any other number of words. And so this is the system is lacking in a way that they cannot go in the existing system and frame that HOS as its own standalone phrase. And so they'll necessarily pull up that huge volume of information. And you're correct, it would be, and I think it was in this case, many, many thousands of emails that were found. And then on top of that, you have to pull them, you have to review them, because law has to make sure that there's nothing subject to an exemption, something that might potentially get produced. And then you have to process them for production, or for disclosure. So in this particular case, TriMet spent a good amount of time, over a week, researching what its own capabilities were in order to come up with the conclusion that it wouldn't be able to do it the right way. And so they made the decision to go out and find a third-party vendor, who then came in and prepared a formal proposal, evaluated what was necessary to do, spent time on that. Then they put together a cost proposal for the requester that was several $1,000s to pay for this third-party vendor, only to have the requester basically abandon the request. Which is not to say that TriMet doesn't have to do that work. It certainly does. That's its public obligation, is to respond to public requests. But from time to time, that type of large-scale request comes in that may or may not actually result in the requester following through and asking for the documents. And whichever way it cuts, TriMet has to do that work. And it necessarily takes away from resources from other work of the agency to process that.
So between, I think the numbers were 600 public requests, potentially for this year, maybe 2,000 incidents on an annual basis. That's 2,600 combined, and you could, I mean, that's, what is that? That could be upwards to 6 to 8 per day of request. If you have an incident, it may go to a request and then on to something like that. So we're talking, I mean, potentially that could be thousands and thousands of documents and requests, based on a year. So that's a significant amount of work. I want to first start off by, not first, but I do want to say that I applaud General Manager Neil McFarland and Jay Turan for being open to bringing in a third party, attorney, law firm, independent, and taking a look at our process. This is something that I think the board really, really appreciates in regards to hearing some things. And I know the public is really keen, and so are we, on transparency. And so we appreciate the opportunity to review this report and get this feedback so that we can be proactive in taking a look at some of these things to ensure that the public is getting taken care of. As I look at the massive amount of data and information, and I know the last time I went to my email and had to search for something, it took me a few hours, and I'm just one person to find the exact document that I wanted to locate, and I can't imagine having to look across thousands of potential email accounts for specific information. So it is a mountain of data. I'm encouraged that there's data and information or systems out there that exist that allow us to be more responsive to these public requests and also the incidences. We also have to consider what the cost is going to be on that, and I know that's something that always brings a little bit of a sticker shock, especially when we're talking budget and competing opportunities within the organization, and making sure that we respond to the public and our ridership and the other stakeholders. So again, I want to applaud the team for being open and being willing to share this information with the public. It sounds like we've had 2 key findings: additional personnel and additional software that we'll need to be looking at in the future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I guess I have a couple questions. I would also want to second what Director Stovall said in terms of taking the initiative and getting this firm on board to give us some recommendations and review. Since if I remember at the Oregonian chided us on the hours of service, you looked at that file or that request.
There was a series of they were treated as separate requests over the course of that story being developed, and I looked at the particular one on request for the HOS on the emails.
Okay, and did you ever find that TriMet either delayed or hid documents in that request?
No, and again, I think it's important to highlight that the opposite is true. I mean, they sent out the acknowledgement letter immediately. They began working on it immediately, trying to locate the particular individuals within the agency that might know where these things might be found. To sort of highlight my prior comment about proactive dealings with these, one of the things they did is they said to go across, the request was for all emails agency-wide, but I think internally they recognized that was going to be a monumental task. And so they were proactive in saying, okay, well, let's try to identify the people, the custodians of emails in the agency who truly might be the target of this request or who might have that relevant information. And so focus their initial efforts on searching those custodians' emails. And remaining in communication with the requester at periods throughout the process, I thought was also something that is not done in every instance, but in this particular case I thought was appropriate and it was a good way of handling it. And so to directly answer the question, no, we did not, and I think the opposite is true.
That's what I want to hear. And I've had the opportunity to be an administrator for large agencies, so this is not an uncommon problem. This is something that every agency deals with. And I guess based on, I don't know whether you've done other public agencies review, but I would love to know kind of your thoughts about how TriMet stacks up against other transit agencies or public agencies in terms of our public records processes and what we're doing right now.
Sure. As part of the development of this report, Scott and I reached out to a very small number of other agencies. This is, I would not say something to hang your hat on, but we wanted to get a sense for your question, which is what's going on in other agencies. And we talked to 5 agencies in comparable sized cities. I would say there's one out of the 5 that had done the serious investment already, particularly in the document mapping, and they've already invested that money. They did a lot of that work in-house. They spent, I think, a number of years putting together that document map so that they have a better handle on those things. Another agency, I think, had recognized the need for that and had committed to finding those funds and resources. And then the others, I think, I would say are probably doing about what TriMet's doing. There is some sense from all of them that they understand this is a problem and something that needs to be addressed, and it's just a matter of time before they're going to have to do this work.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions on this part?
One quick question I'd like to ask, and it's probably, I probably already know the answer, that it's a possible no. Is there any way in which 2 agencies could share the software and it still work for each agency? For instance, could TriMet partner with, say, Lane or some other transportation company like that?
I can just tell you that the Secretary of State has a program where there is an archive service that we could use. That's one of the things that we will evaluate. I think that TriMet's problem, of course, is not archiving the documents. I think we do that very well. So I'm not really sure that's a system that we need. And we would still need to have the tools to do the searching. But I think the Secretary of State has developed that, and hopefully in the future, maybe they'll improve that and that those will be available for all public bodies.
Thank you. All right. No further questions on this. I think we're going to get to the punchline a bit more on the system. Where you're going to brief us on some of the planning you're doing on the document recovery system next.
Well, I think I kind of told you what we were.
You gave us the punchline.
Yeah, I gave you the punchline.
All right,
I gave you the line by line. But you know, I think the thing that you need to know is that this is going to take place in a couple of phases. First, we have to figure out what it is that we have, and we need to get rid of what we don't need anymore. And then we will create this document map. We will interview all of the departments. So we will have the map, but there will also be an ongoing process of actually getting the physical paper records into electronic form, and that will take years. The second part of the process will be the evaluation of the software that we already have. We understand that there are components that they call snap-ons that may be able to be added to software that we already have, which would save us money. I just want to throw out the price tag for you because and give you a little bit of sticker shock here, because the city of Beaverton looked at doing this very same thing about 4 or 5 years ago as a result of some litigation with Nike. And the price tag there was $5 million. So and I recognize that when you think about this, you're thinking about new buses and new service, just as I'm sure the general manager, when I asked for an additional FTE, he's thinking about having, additional personnel to do the work of transit. And so my hope is that we can leverage what we have, but I guarantee you we'll be back with an ask from you.
All right, thank you. I think it gets back to Director Bethel's question, is there ways to partner to be able to save costs and maybe have more than one agency bear the cost of the development and implementation. So we look forward to the discussion in the budgets, and again, thank you for your efforts in being proactive on this one. This is very helpful, and I'm glad. I think it was a good report, and I think it's a good, sound recommendation. So thank you both for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on then to the General Manager's report. Mr. McFarland.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, I have a bit of a potpourri of General Manager's report today with a number of items in it. One of the items that was actually scheduled a little bit later, I wanted to take a piece of that now, if you could, which is that we have a special guest with us, which is Multnomah County Commissioner Loretta Smith. And I believe the reason that Commissioner Smith is here is to talk about our involvement with Work Systems, Inc., with a summer internship program that has been very, very successful. So I wanted to take that point first because I know the Commissioner has a busy schedule.
All right, thank you. Commissioner, you can introduce yourself and the folks with you.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, President Warner, Director Bethel, Director Stovall, General Manager William McFarland, and Council TriMet. My name is Loretta Smith, and I am the Multnomah County Commissioner for District 2. And I have to say, it feels like I'm in a Work Systems board meeting.
Is that good or bad?
That's a good thing.
All right.
Considering I haven't been there in a while, I've been pretty busy. And it's always good for me to come out and talk about summer works. And I know that Director Stovall, he knows about it, he's on the Work Systems Board. It's very personal for me because I participated in a similar program in Michigan when I was growing up with the same WIA dollars through the U.S. Department of Labor. So for me to come back and participate with TriMet, DHS, City of Portland, Multnomah County, since I started in 2011, it is a very rewarding thing for me to do. And also very selfish in a way too, because in the next 5 years of the 4,500 employees, more than half of them will be eligible for retirement. So I'd really like some of those folks to come back and work for Multnomah County and not TriMet, because the baby boomers will be retiring in all local governments. So for me, this is very personal. And I have to say, I need to come to your board meetings more often. That was very interesting about the public records request. And we've received a lot of requests as of late for our public records. And so I was wondering what our process is. Now I have to go back this morning and find out what our process is, because it seems that we've been doing that the way that we're supposed to, but maybe we're missing some things. We might ask ourselves, why is summer work so important of a regional program? And I'd just like to cite some statistics from a new report by the Annie Casey Foundation. It finds that employment for teens is at the lowest level in 57 years. Nationwide, 6.5 million people ages 16 to 24 are both out of school and out of work. Statistics with dire economic and social consequences for many. The news is no better here for Oregon, and it has the 11th highest percentage of unemployed teens in the country, with only 28% working, and for young African American males, this rate is even lower at 12%. And there are more than 36 young people in Portland, in the region, who are not in school or working. And 1,500 more are likely to drop out of area high schools this year. At the same time, regional employers are increasingly concerned about finding qualified workers. Over the next 10 years, there are projected to be 50,000 replacement openings in critical local industries like public transportation. Summer Works is helping to combat these statistics. It truly is taking a team of over 500 young people in summer jobs over the summer in the city of Portland and throughout our region. TriMet joins Multnomah County, the city of Portland, DHS, Clackamas, and Washington counties. Nonprofit organizations such as Anthem, Central Cultural, and Home Plate. And many of these nonprofits also do business with Multnomah County. So where we could not place all of our 100 Summer Works youth this summer, we placed them in nonprofit organizations that we do business with. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to applaud you for all your efforts. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years. This is such a great program, and I think it's going to be critical for building a pipeline and a workforce for not only local government, but for private industry as well. And I look forward to working with you on this issue for many more years to come. And I'm not sure what your budget looks like for 15, but I'd certainly like to have an opportunity to talk to you about that so that we can get some of the 10 that you have and double that for the next year. And a real critical piece to this was when I first started with Multnomah County as the county commissioner in 2011, I partnered with Work Systems, and they're great in the city of Portland in Mayor Adams' office. And they asked me, would I be willing to work on this? This was the first initiative that I worked on as a county commissioner. And we started off with 25 young people. In 2012, I doubled that in our budget for 50. And this year, we have 100 Summer Works interns throughout the city in Multnomah County. And for me, that's huge, 100 kids. And those were 100 kids that wouldn't ordinarily have an opportunity to build up their skills in their resume. So for me, this is my charge. Whenever you see me or you hear me talk, it will be about Summer Works. And I think the work that they've done in partnership with Work Systems has been huge. And it's been a huge and critical opportunity for many. So I'm gonna let you, am I gonna push it over to Janelle or?
Good morning, John Ovell, Director
Yes.
of Diversity and Transit Equity. We're a little out of order this morning, but a couple of quick things. We are going to play a quick video. I think we have that queued up, which will give you all a little bit of flavor of the young people who work with us this year. As Commissioner mentioned, TriMet for the first time this year has joined a number of regional leaders, in part because Director Stovall thought it would be a good idea, but also the general manager said, how can we really partner with the regional effort to ensure that young people really have meaningful placement opportunities throughout the summer. So we were thrilled to place 30 young people in jobs all throughout county, the 3-county service district that TriMet serves. 23 placed with us directly, from capital projects to legal to you name a number of other departments. And we were also thrilled to place 7 with community-based partners. So let's hear from our young people, and then we'll hear from Teresa Gould, who will tell us a little bit about her experience in working capital projects this year.
I'm a public affairs intern at TriMet, and I do outreach around the city every day to sign up people for our new Riders Club. At the end of this experience, I'd like to just know more about myself and how I work with the community and kind of get more of a feel for the general urban vibe of the city. Going this internship is a really good way for me to get into other jobs
I like it because it's talking to go outside my comfort zone and not be afraid to talk to people. Help me get a new job. I had no work experience until this internship, so it will help me the work skills. I'm working with Allie on capital projects. She has me on business gaming, filing, data entry, and delivering notes. Other than I have to be here at 9 in the morning, I should like it. I am an intern as a policy and planning assistant with Jen Owen. Yeah, he's been very helpful when we needed help on things, to explains everything very clearly, and it's not as quiet as I thought an office job would be.
Hi, you guys. My name is Teresa Luo. I was born and raised in South Sudan. I moved here a couple years ago. I just graduated from Benson High School. Next month, I will be heading out to University of Oregon. This is actually my first year having a real job. So this has been a really good experience. I've been working with data entries and doing different other projects in the TriMet office. So I really like it, and I'll be happy to come back next year and work with you guys again.
As long as it doesn't start before 9.
Well, other than waking up in the morning, I like it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no worries. The only recap, and I think the general manager had a few comments, but you might be asking, why is TriMet placing 30 young people, spending the funds to do an internship program? One of which is, the commissioner mentioned earlier, we have outrageous youth unemployment rates, not only in Oregon, but in Multnomah County. That rate is worse amongst young kids of color. So one of which is we do it to help provide meaningful working experiences that will set our young people up for future success. But also we do it because part of our goal at TriMet is transit equity. And one element of our transit equity policy is really economic empowerment. That's why we do the DBE program and the small business program. So this is a continuation of our policies around transit equity. And it's just really been a great pleasure working with these young people, and we look forward to doing it again in the future. With that, we'll take any questions.
Well, I don't have very many questions, just a comment, and I will say that I'm biased. I have been on the Workforce Investment Board for about 6 years, and I've also gotten to enjoy serving on the executive committee with the organization. So I've gotten to see and hear a lot of this information and the dramatic changes and negative dramatic changes in our youth employment. And I know many of you probably already know there is a direct correlation between youth employment and then success throughout